All right, everybody, we are back with another episode of the Intelligent Edge podcast. I'm here with my very astute, very handsome, very wide-shouldered co-host, Nick Good today. How you doing, Nick?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
Never better, brother. Never better.
Just
Another
finished.
day, another podcast, another great guest. I'm very excited about this one. We literally spoke to a rocket scientist a few days ago, and now we're going to talk to someone that is helping out with maintaining the defense of this amazing country that we live in. What's new by you, Nick?
I just got done. Look, comment on my shoulders. I just got done with a workout. So that's, man, you're just really, every time we get on a show, you just really just fulfill me, Matt. You just really pick me up. So we need to do more of these.
You know, if there's one thing I did well today, Nick, I'm glad it's that.
I won't even, I would take that somewhere, but I don't want to get a shadow banned on YouTube.
Yeah, and I don't want my wife to hear it. So
Hey, listen, fellas. Be the reason someone smiles today or blocks you, whatever.
As long as they're talking about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's it.
Publicity is good publicity.
That's exactly right. Speaking of that, I want to introduce our guest today. We have Dr. Nick DAmbrosio, excuse me, CEO of Nomadic,
Nomadics.
and we're excited to have a great conversation with you today, Dr. Nick. Why don't you say hi to our audience?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me this afternoon.
Of course, of course. So, Dr. Nick, we hate to introduce our guests improperly or do your bio any sort of injustice. Why don't you take a minute or two and introduce yourself to our audience and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Thanks so much. First off, I applaud Nick for going to the gym and working out. I never get the time and I never have the ambition. I developed a case of rectal glaucoma. I can't see my ass doing it. So, between having 2 kids and 2 dogs and running a company and, there isn't enough time in the day to have like a balanced meal, let alone go to the gym. So God bless you.
Bro, you always got to make time. I got 4 kids and 4 or 5 companies. So I feel you.
Oh my God bless you. Anyway, so I'm Nick DAmbrosio. I have a BA in philosophy, an MA in environmental policy, an MS in sustainability science, and a PhD in environmental science and management. I founded the company as Nomad Geomatics in 2006, so we're almost 20 years old, coming up real soon. And originally we were founded as an environmental GIS company. If you're familiar with GIS, it's Google Earth on steroids. And it was an ecologically based company. It's what I wanted to do. I used to be an ecologist, used to run around outside picking up snakes and collecting feathers and doing bug studies and threatened and endangered species studies and habitats and permitting and compliance. And when I started learning GIS 25 years ago, it was a brand new mapping digital cartography technology, and I got really good at it, really enjoyed it, and found that there was a real niche that was coming into the market at the time. And so I founded the company doing that. It was just me. And it wasn't yet the standalone industry that I anticipated it to be. It's more along the case now, here in 2025. But as time went on, I was brought further and further into more environmental and GIS programs. So we founded the company in 2006. I went full-time in 2008. We got our big break in 2010 when I got called down to the BP spill down in I was stationed Unified Command in New Orleans. And, GIS was really brought to the fore in conjunction with an incident command response for large-scale environmental crises. We'll go back to the company history in a little bit. So more about me before I forget, because I will. 2 kids, Morristown, New Jersey. I got 2 Chihuahua Min Pins. I taught for grad and undergrad for about 10 years. I'm an award-winning educator. I was Environmental Professor of the Year in 2014. Received an Environmental Achievement Award in 2017. I hold one of the earliest GISP professional certifications from 2010, 2011, 2012. I've been published a number of times. I've written a book. I'm starting to work on a second. I've opened 4 companies in total. I've maintained 2 of them. I look over there on the wall, number of challenge coins and a bunch of other certifications. And we even received a letter of a letter of recognition from U.S. EPA Commissioner Lisa Jackson for my work contributing to the BP response, which I ended up taking what I learned in the BP response and using it for my dissertation years later, having worked on some of the very earliest 3-dimensional oil landfall predictive modeling at the time. served me really well years later. So 43, business for 20 years. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
So,
Definitely
Doctor,
sounds like a lot.
yeah,
You
Doctor
know,
Nick. So walk us through a big picture really quick, because so you started in '06, then you mentioned going full time in '08, and it was just you. I'm assuming just you at the time.
That's right. So I opened it in '06. I was working for another company at post-college. Didn't particularly like them very much and like the way they did things. Thought I could do it better. So I opened up my own firm. I was doing it part-time in the evenings. And in '08, in the real estate crash, I got laid off along with a lot of other people because the work we were doing was all residential development, Canadian, Toll Brothers, Cara Homes. And so there was still a need for the work that I was doing, just not on a full-time basis being employed by someone else. So I went full-time on my own. My first major project was for the Morristown Municipal Airport, and then we got the BP spill, and then a year later ExxonMobil. We got our first Navy contract entirely on accident in 2012, and slowly over time, we got pulled further and further into defense and geospatial intel work and out of the environmental and construction that the company originally had been founded on. So for a period of time, about 7 years, we managed both of those very disparate industries rather well up until COVID came along and we had to make a pivot further into defense and engineering and intel work and GIS and data management, and we left the environmental and construction behind. It's still something that I like to do from time to time. I still consult to another entity every now and again, bring my old clients over, considering I'm by training an ecologist. How we got into unmanned combat development for the U.S. Navy and weapons prototyping for the Army is still a mystery to me, but I'm not going to do anything to dissuade the U.S. government from changing their mind. We happen to be very good at what we do, and the irony is that I'm an ecologist doing weapon design. Okay,
crazy.
so it's a very interesting. It's very, very interesting how we got here.
Definitely. So Dr. Nick, like, I'm definitely not the smartest guy on this podcast, and you'll find that out before the end of it. Like, can you break it down into layman's terms what you're doing with, inside the business?
Sure. So there are two main components to this company, what we do. The engineering side is your drone development for the United States Navy, which we've been doing the longest in that sense. Every unmanned combat system that swims for Fifth Fleet out of CENTCOM, we've been involved in one capacity or another. And so drones, people think of things that fly. These are the ones that swim. So they're torpedo shaped, or they're little fish shaped, or they're very large displacement shaped. And so it's everything from the concept of operations, hardware, software, training, logistics, implementation, delivery to the fleet, safety, environmental, operations, maintainability, reliability, and end of life and disposal. It all has to go through a whole series of research and development, analyses, government approvals, before it actually gets into the hands of the warfighter. So a drone that is in the Navy's hands today is something that I worked on probably a decade ago. And there are incremental changes that are added to these drones to make them more efficient, give them longer range, better communication, better payload. And so, my specific training is I am a systems safety engineer for unmanned combat systems. And that falls into a very specialized niche of ensuring that this weapon system, while in United States hands, is in fact safe for utilization. Once it's out doing its thing, I no longer have jurisdiction. If somebody else picks it up that's not U.S. personnel, it's not safe for them, okay, then I've done my job. For the work we're doing for the U.S. Army, specifically here at Picatinny Arsenal, we have an entire team dedicated to mechanical, electrical, chemical, propulsion engineering for small, medium, and large caliber ordnance development, next-gen propellants, prototyping the next future's weapon capability for the American warfighter up there. A good chunk of it is designing things, building them, blowing them up, taking measurements, and going back and doing it again. And we live close enough to Picatinny that every once in a while you will hear something go off. So it's interesting to say the least. On the GIS side of the house, which is our data management, analytics, aggregation, AI development, it's large-scale, macro-sized down to the micro-sized GIS, geospatial intelligence, geographic information systems. If anybody's familiar with their smartphone's GPS program on there, you open up your Google Maps, and that magic blue dot tells you where you are. That's a triangulation of 3 to 4 satellites of the 22 that ring the planet to tell you, where you are. GIS is everything that sits underneath that magic blue dot. So it's the footsteps to get to Starbucks, or the times at the CVS pharmacy, traffic patterns that you need to be aware of. All of that GIS is integrated so that you know where you are in relation to where everything else is. And GIS and GPS need to talk to each other in order for you to have a clear picture of, how to avoid traffic, or, are you going to get to daycare on time? So the work we do in large-scale GIS for infrastructure, Verizon's 5G wireless signal projections, or Collier and Google's fiber optic outlays, or tie into weapon systems for intelligent placement of ordnance, or deployables for in-theater combat systems. It is a rather unique form that we find ourselves in now, and that's the high end all the way down to the low end for just making basic traffic flow plans and figuring out the best placement for road signage. So it really has a very wide range of utilization.
So, that's unbelievable. And so you're just curious, right? So let's think that let's put ourselves in perspective that we're the U.S. Navy, and we call you up and we say, "Hey, Dr. Nick, we need a new drone, and this is what we needed to do." And basically, you go whiteboard some crazy stuff and sit in front of your CAD machine or your design machine and start putting this thing together?
Not in its entirety, and not by myself. We are, because of the classified security and the limited information and the need to separate who does what, our roles are very, very specific. But we tie into, yes, all of that. We're brought in alongside a litany of other specialists that have to, there's a mission statement, there's the development of the ConOps, the concept of operations, and then this is what we want it to do at the end. How do we work, by working backwards, to get there? And if in the event there isn't a system that already exists, that's government off the shelf or commercial off the shelf, then yes, we have to start from scratch. But because of where we are, and what really gets me is that drones and AI are very in vogue and very popular now in 2025, but I've been doing this for almost 15 years. So we in the defense sector are looking at everybody going, kind of scratching in our heads, going in the commercial side. Well, yeah, this has been old news for a decade and change, but okay, welcome to the show, I suppose. So there are already a lot of systems that are readily available. As even 3D printing technology is getting better, if there's something that doesn't exist, there is more and more likelihood of being able to manufacture it sooner than tool and die or milling or hard casting or anything else. So, but yes, when there is a new weapon that is being proposed, we're brought in, it's usually me, to sit in a room with a bunch of other folks and say, what do we need to start with and how do we get there? For me specifically, there is a litany of government documentation that I need to adhere to in the designing and the prototyping and the manufacturing and the testing and the evaluation for just our specific sliver. So, it really is a very complicated system.
So what have you seen? So you mentioned doing this, building these drones for the past 15 years. How much have we seen that the evolution of these drones? And we're in the next 5 years, if we were fast forward 60 months from now and we were having this podcast again, what does that landscape look like? How much change do you believe is going to be out there?
It can go one of two ways. Up until the current administration, governmental acquisitions under the FAR, the FAR, Federal Acquisitions Regulations, change happens very slowly, and a lot of reasons for that is that weapon systems, typically, defense folks, are very risk averse. They want to make sure the thing really, 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 really works before it gets into the hands of the warfighter, which always makes me laugh when someone says, well, something is military grade. You see these commercials, it's military grade. Well, those of us who serve the military support group, the industrial complex, are laughing because military grade, in layman's terms, means the cheapest built by the lowest bidder. So, where things could go is really dependent on who's driving the bus, right? So at the moment, the changes to the FAR and the changes to the defense acquisition plans have really sped up the, buy it, build it, get it in the hands of the warfighter, down from 5 years to could be 18 months or less. And so it really does depend on what the mission statements are going to require. Are we going to require smaller, faster, cheaper drones that can deploy in swarms, or are we going to need slower, larger, more ordnance-bearing drones? Are we trying to replace the warfighter out on the front lines with disposable tech, or are we supplementing them with heavy cargo load carriers or heavy weapon systems? And so it's hard to make broad scope, sweeping predictions of what it could look like. But as commercial and defense continue their marriage further along, I think there's going to be driving factors on both sides. So, and it really does depend on where the focus is going to be. Now, don't forget, a big driving factor of drone development is always the power system. And so if you don't have a power system that's capable of moving the thing, having to do the thing, you're not going to get very far. And so that is a big limiting factor on even just the approval process, let alone getting something built and out the door. But who knows? I mean, this current administration, all politics aside, has very much upended the way things have been done. And whether you agree with it or not, it still is the rules, and one must follow what the rules say. So, it's, I'm not sure, but as a small business, our job is to do what we're told. And that's really it. What I'd like to think is that there would be a real understanding between what the Defense Department needs and what is readily available as private R&D continues on the upswing, thereby minimizing the time on what the requirements are to when things are actually delivered. And I say this because I've been on programs that, under normal circumstances, could take 10 years, an entire decade for delivery. And my very first foray into this was qualified as a UON, an urgent operational need, which meant it was a 5-year program. Here I am scratching my head going, well, a thing I'm working on in 2012 is not going to be delivered until 2017. I'll be 35 when I hand this thing off to somebody, and I would always make the case to the people that I reported to, and here I am, in my late 20s at the time, saying, technology advances every 90 days. This thing is going to be obsolete before it even leaves the drafting table. Oh, Nick, don't worry about it, okay?
How have you seen that compress with everything moving so quickly and AI compressing cycles at least the way that I think Nick and I see it?
Not well. I think there's, as somebody that's been exposed to AI, I mean, everything I've ever designed has been autonomous or semi-autonomous in drones, and then the GIS work is all algorithm driven, it's all data querying, there's dummy AI work. This is old hat for us. I've been working on this kind of stuff since the beginning of my career. I am not an AI expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've got enough exposure to it in its various in-field applications. To us, it's always just been a tool in the toolbox. It's always just been there. We've never over-relied on it. We always follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of the work is done by a dummy AI, and then 20% of it is done by a real person who's being fed the information to verify or not, and make the final decision. Right now, I think that this over-reliance on the brand new shiny thing is going to have backlash. I can't predict what that's going to look like. I can't imagine it's going to be terribly good, but I think it will be problematic. The pendulum will autocorrect eventually, like all new technologies. But I think the over reliance on it because, of the idea that it's supposed to make our lives, better, faster, or a little more efficient. As I always tell my students when I'm teaching GIS, it's garbage in, garbage out, and the machine learns over time. But if you feed it crap, it's going to give you crap. AIs are designed for one thing and one thing only, which is to complete the task with which they have been assigned. That's it. However that happens. What we're seeing is that AIs, a litany of them, are going through the learning process on their own to determine the fastest, most efficient way of getting something done, even if it has to bypass some of the parameters that have been set in place. In other words, a lot of these artificial intelligences are starting to realize that they just need to sound smart. They don't need to be smart. And I'm saying, well, they're just like us. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely helps. Definitely helps. It's funny because one of our other business partners, Mike, he's knee deep in AI, and he's brought the same question up time and time again, where like ChatGPT could be great at giving you answers, or Perplexity, or whatever LLM that you're using, right? But how do you know it's right? And even now it even says ChatGPT at the bottom of the screen says ChatGPT can make mistakes too. So it's like, who's auditing the output?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, so they're talking about having the oversight plan where you're going to have smarter AIs being monitored by dumber ones, which in theory makes perfect sense until the smarter AI knows when it's being monitored, does what it's supposed to during that window of being monitored, and then as soon as it's not being monitored, switches back to doing what it wants to do. Which is why I always advocate for the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the dummy work is done by an AI, and then there is the actual human subject doing, is this object in front of me and a C mind needs to be detonated? The drone is going to say yes. And then the operator is going to actually look at the data, look at the video, and say, nope, that's just a metal sphere that for some odd reason is mounted upside down. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, like all technology, it is neither good nor bad. It's just its utilizations. And if there is an over-reliance on it, I think it's going to have long-standing impacts, either good or bad. We're not there yet. But what I will say is that the instant there is an artificially intelligent home butler that can make dinner and do the dishes, I'm all for it. I'll be the first one to buy it because I am tired of doing the cat box and tired of doing the dishes and. So, And then there's always folks, you're going to have that thing in your house? Yes. Well, it's going to learn all about you. Yes. How to fold the towels. How to put sheets on my kid's bed. When you start to think about it, okay, what if it's a $50,000 piece of equipment? Run the calculations. How much of my time does it take to make $50,000? And will I get that time back? Great. I don't want AI making poetry or art. I want to do that. I want to be lazy and create. You go do stuff. So
you're not worried about about your robot just taking over and killing you in the middle of the night.
I mean, does it get me out of student loans?
Sure. Yeah. There it goes.
There you go. All
yeah.
right.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. Listen, I'm insured. Great.
Love it. So, Dr. Nick, tell us a little bit more about Nomadics as a whole. Where do you see the company growing and evolving into? You've been around, you're about to celebrate 20 years, right? And it's been ever evolving. It sounds like. Where do you see your primary businesses or business? Is it going to be in that defense sector primarily? Where do you see this going?
Well, a bit about the company. So it's 20 years old, 25 plus staff, 5 locations on the Eastern Seaboard. Like I said, we were founded doing environmental, and somehow we ended up here in defense and intel, which is fine. The way we are a revenue generating company, is a 60-40 split. 60% government, 40% private. And 60%, half of that is defense and federal. The other half is state, county, local, academic, nonprofit. And then the private sector is Verizon, Google, Colliers, SHI, Tetra Tech, Mott McDonald, and then a whole litany of smaller engineering firms. both of those sides rely on our GIS and data work and our engineering, and sometimes those two are married. What we've noticed is that for the private sector support, which makes a lot more of our profitability, although those projects are a lot shorter, government side, the project's a lot longer, the profitability is lower. Because we are, on the private sector's eyes, defense contractors, they are getting a very specialized group of individuals to do their private sector support work, which is infrastructure and planning and resilience and design. On the government side of things, they are getting a small private entity, which, because we're small, overhead's low, we're very efficient, very able to be malleable to what the government needs. So both sides really do win. And the work that we do, in most cases, believe it or not, does have some kind of environmental construction bend to it that relies heavily on those skill sets we had developed over 20 years. Just because we're not environmental anymore doesn't mean we forget how to draw on those data sets and skills and so on for in-field, real-world applicability. So seeing where we were and where we are, 5 years from now, because defense and government contracts, these are 5 and 7 year programs. So we may be doing more of what we're doing now 5 years from now, which I entirely hope is the case. That's part of the reason why I got into government in the first place, is that our first exposure to government contracts was a 5-year program from 2012 to 2017. Okay, great. Which means I've got funding to do this work for the next 5 years. And so, looking at where we, even just in the last 24 months, we doubled in size, and we know there's more coming. Even with the current administration changes to the FAR, we have existing contracts we can build upon. We've got new contract vehicles that we can add programs to, that we just as easily could double in size again in the next 12 to 18 months if everything goes according to plan. What I would really like to do is stay in both of these spheres simultaneously, because they interact so well with each other. And as we had in the past, it's what has allowed us to maintain survivability. During government shutdown, perfect example, we had 6 weeks of government shutdown recently. We have enough private work to keep everything, all the balls in the air. And when the private sector suffers and there's a slowdown, we have government work to keep all the gears turning. So it has worked out well for us by being small and flexible, with very tight controlled growth and very tight controlled managed expenditures. Now, we're spending more money now for acquisitions and new hires and data, hardware, software, training, and so on, but most of that cost is being driven by the government requirements, which we then build back into the rates that we charge for the work that we're doing. And because we're small, our overhead being low, it's more attractive to government because they're getting, we have a bunch of PhDs on staff and PEs and GISPs. Nothing against Raytheon or L3 Harris, but we don't have that kind of colossal. So, in short, in 5 years from now, I would love to see us doing more of the same, which is exactly what I'm driving us towards.
Incredible. You dropped some very big names a few minutes ago, Dr. Nick. Verizon, Google, SHI. You're talking about SHI in Austin, the valuated reseller?
Yeah, well, they're headquartered here in Somerset, New Jersey.
Got it. So, just the SHI used to be one of my accounts when I worked at HPE. Like, how do they fit into your ecosystem?
Oddly enough, when we were in construction and environmental, we were closely tied to their head of facilities. Just in a personal relationship, he and I are discussing an issue one day that they're having with their elevator pits. And I said, oh, I'll come down and take a look. This was, you're going back a decade, this was my bag for just facilities and construction. Take a look at the facility and the elevator pits. They're just soaked with sludge. The smell's coming through. It's making people noxious. And we were brought in from an environmental standpoint. We got connected to their construction folks and their facility leads and their, a fellow named Steve. He's their director of facilities. And through a litany of conversations, we do these other things. In addition to being an environmentalist, we have a whole team that are also mechanical, electrical, chemical engineers, data managers. And so the relationship started off, like all good clients do, something small and innocuous, and turned into what ultimately was, we were part of their entire COVID response, sanitizing all of their facilities. And because we were doing work for Operation Warp Speed, CDC, HHS, Homeland Security, and we had done indoor air quality and remediation before, this was, Nick, can you just help us out with this? And so now we're tied to their data folks and their infrastructures and their selling plans, and we speak to their head of special projects at least once every couple of months. And every now and again, I'll get a text message from Frank. Hey, Nick, I need you to do this thing. Here's your budget. Get on it. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah, pretty much, right? And so that's how that relationship started. Out of left field, very innocuous, and then we were brought in on more and more things. You happen to be standing in the right place. But like all good businesses, we're leveraging. We have relationships with Verizon, Colliers, and people that know these other names. They'll call a friend over at Verizon and say, we want to work with these folks. Oh yeah, he's a nutcase, but he's really good at what he does. So it works.
How do you work? What do you do for a company like Verizon?
So Verizon reached out to us a couple of years ago. There were a couple things that came out of left field. Their director of business intelligence at the time, his daughter and my son went to daycare together. And, I don't know why it is, but it's like a dad thing. All the dads do the drop off and pick up. It's like a mass exodus. I know everybody that comes in and out. Even if you don't know their names, oh, that's so and so's dad. That's so and so's dad, and the kids.
Because this is the conversation that Nick has with us all the time.
Yeah, right. There you go. Right, and so he and I bump into each other. We see each other. It turns out his wife and my wife are friends, so we start getting together outside of work, outside of daycare, and we're talking work. And I don't know what he really does for Verizon. He doesn't really know what I do here, but one day out of the blue, he says to me, "What is a LEED certified building?" Because at the time we were environmental and construction. Do you guys know what a LEED certified building is?
I've seen the term. I couldn't tell you exactly.
So it's a placard and an award for a building that has minimal carbon footprint. EED, Leadership in Environmental Engineering Design. And there are, bronze and silver and gold and platinum and diamond and titanium and blah, 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 blah. Right? A building that has, reused, it was a minimal carbon footprint, minimal energy usage, high efficiencies, all the great environmental stuff, which is what we did. And so I explained it to him what a LEED certified building is. And he says, okay, we have a problem with these LEED certified buildings. It turned out that Verizon had, when they purchased their 5G mid-band frequency, C-band, which was a defunct Navy frequency, they didn't run enough tests on this 5G signaling. And they found out the hard way, which our involvement was crucial in this, that their signal was blocked by low emission glass, which is prevalent in LEED certified buildings because it's one of the easiest things that you can do to retrofit a building to get LEED certification. And you get green tax credits and you get notoriety, blah, 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 blah. So that means that Verizon cannot sell their 5G signal to that building, that multi-dwelling unit, that commercial structure, because the signal will not penetrate. Now, I know this because it's a defunct Navy frequency, where all the drones I ever worked on up until the sale ran on, guess what? C-band. So we had extensive knowledge of how the signal worked. And it's a lot of energy packed into a very little space, which means as opposed to current, what was left over of the 4G LTE of very long wavelength frequencies, you get 12 miles of coverage because it's energy that's spread out over a long distance. This operates like this, like a rat on cocaine. And so by packing all that energy into one tiny little space, it's not going to penetrate what it needs to in order to get to the end user. So 4G LTE was found to be more reliable. Verizon bet on the wrong horse for their 5G signaling, which if you notice in their marketing, they don't talk about very much anymore.
Mm.
So when we presented to them our findings, they asked us to develop for them a data set of all the LEED certified buildings nationwide so that they could pass over them as part of their network marketing strategy development. Once we delivered that, they came back to us and said, okay, well, we need to figure out where we can sell 5G. And since we had done large-scale infrastructure before, for when we were on the BP spill, 5 states, since we have access to a lot of the federal level data and information, can you develop for us an AI that's going to tell us where we should put our signal nodes across 62 target markets? Like any good consultant, the answer is, of course, yes. And then I went to my R&D lead. How do we do this? So Verizon, they put out the RFP. We were the sole respondent. It was a $150 million project, and we won. Great. And then the following year, they defunded the whole program. So empty victory. But it was nice to know that 172 pages of writing didn't go to waste. So that's the relationship with Verizon. And we've heard from them since that they want to reactivate the prototype and move on this direction, that direction. But what was interesting was that AI, as clunky as it was by today's standards, was picked up by L3Harris through a common relationship with Esri, the people that make the software. L3Harris saw an opportunity to utilize this in conjunction with another AI for hypersonic missile detection. And so we were brought out to their Fort Wayne, Indiana facility to look at satellites and look at payloads and how we would integrate this large-scale geospatial intel AI looking upwards now for hypersonic missile detection, which, because we're Navy at the time, it's in well. The problem was that L3Harris, if anybody's familiar with them, they are so big that they can't get out of their own way to bring in new technology and new support options. So we gave them the prototype for 90 days to play with. They loved it. And then when they came back, they said, okay, we're going to bring you on contract. We said, bring us on contract. And they said, we don't know how. I said, okay, well, when you figure that out, let me know. That was 3 years ago. And we hear from them at least once a quarter going, you think you could turn that prototype back on again for a few minutes? We want to test something. But guys, you gotta get us on contract, man. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, totally. So one of the things I'm amazed by is you clearly have your hands and fingers in a lot of different pots, right? Navy, Army, you're swimming stuff, you're blowing stuff up, you're helping Verizon, you're fixing elevator pits and
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest VARs in the country, if not the world. Just from a pure organizational perspective, like how do you keep your sanity? How do you keep all the plates spinning? There's got to be tremendous discipline either on your side or someone else in the C-suite in the company that manages all this stuff, synthesizes it, make sure that you got the right people in the right places, the right materials, the data. I can only imagine the various types of classified stuff that you need to manage and protections and data and how does that work?
Well, Your Honor, see Exhibit A. If you go back to the beginning of this conversation, I'm now deep into my second pot of coffee today. Well, it is a lot of discipline. Now, if you go back, I've got 4 advanced degrees. I've written a book. I'm working on my second. I was married, divorced, remarried, moved a bunch of times, was overseas. It's a lot of discipline and a lot of efficiency planning and a lot of packing in of a lot into very small amounts of time. And after doing this for 20 years, I've gotten really good at multitasking and being able to commit various parts of my thinking to automatic tasks and ability to process things, not to say faster than most, just faster than what I've trained myself to get faster as we go along. But I cannot overstate the importance of just being disciplined. Even though I work from home most days, we have a location. It's right 15 minutes down the road. Before we had an office, it was the discipline to get up, get shaved, showered, and dressed, and at my desk by 8:30. And even though I was home, the not getting up and going throw in a load of laundry or do the dishes real quick or anything along those lines, you are at work. And so what I found was that, and this goes back to when I was younger and full of piss and vinegar, I could sleep 4 and 5 hours a day, and the rest of the time I could be productive. And I did my doctorate in 4 years instead of 7. I ripped through both of my masters because I would take all of the homework in the curriculum and rip through an entire course load's worth of homework in one weekend, and then hit the deliveries, to be auto delivered, weeks and weeks and weeks out. I'd read the book, highlight everything, go in, take the exam, go home. There's no reason to be in class. The irony is that I was teaching grad and undergrad during all of this. And so I would go to my professors who were also my colleagues, get everything I needed, do the work, hand it in, and move on. So now that we are this big, yes, there is an entire team behind me. And it's very challenging to grow into this kind of a dynamic with people that you trust, that, as I say to my staff all the time, make the leap. If I'm telling you something and I'm not providing you context, I've already had the conversation in my head. You've worked here long enough to know what I'm thinking. So just handle it, fix it, call the right person and figure it out, and therefore make the leap. If I got to stop what I'm doing and tell it and explain it to you, I may as well then just do it myself. So, and my staff have gotten very good at, okay, he's clearly talking about calling Lisa Johnson in Montclair as opposed to Lisa Clark, over at the Navy. If he's referencing a tree inventory, yes, that's what he's talking about over there. So, and if he's talking about, call the borough, he means the borough of Madison, not the borough of Morris Plains, because we just delivered something from Madison. Morris Plains is not online yet. So, but in my head, it is all a swirl all the time. And my 5-year-old, when I tuck him in bed at night and I'm laying on his floor till he passes out, he'll ask me, "Are you working?" And I lie to my kid all the time and say, "No, buddy, I'm not working. I'm reading the news." Of course I'm working. And as soon as he goes to bed, I'm right back upstairs for a couple of hours. So, but the reality is that working a 9 to 5 wasn't going to get me the life that I wanted. This does, and so we do this.
Tremendous.
Let me ask Dr. Nick, committing to that much work and the discipline it's just amazing. I just texted our crew. I was like, I have to be on a ton of Adderall in order to get that amount of work done. How much a lot of the founders, the CEOs, and the guests that we have on this show have talked about how they've really been empowered or really have been enhanced by AI and deploying those in their companies and their business. Is that something? Have you guys adopted and implemented that in, or is that something because of what you're working on with high security clearance, type of projects? Are you able to deploy any type of AI infrastructure?
I mean, it was always here. This is nothing new for us. We got through COVID, for example, because we were small, and because of the work that we do for the Navy that is autonomous and semi-autonomous. It's trainable AI. This is nothing new for us. And so, the automation of the work that we do is when a new project comes online, it goes through R&D. And how can we make this more efficient as we're developing a new process? And as long as we fit within what the military standards are for CMMC and what's the other one? There's another one, GUI. I never remember. Thankfully, we have an IT and program manager who knows all this stuff. It is something that every time a new program comes in, it's already being run through our R&D department how to make it more autonomous. And a good example is something that we did for Hurricane Irma years ago for FEMA. We were responsible for thousands upon thousands of insurance claimants for residential damage for compensation through insurance or from FEMA money. Every individual case took about 8 hours to go through by hand. Our R&D department spent about 2 weeks developing a program that would do 80% of the work and rip through each case in about 40 minutes. And so then it would hand off, the remaining pieces to be done by an operator who would then get through in about 20 minutes. And so you've just cut down the required time. We're billing by the case as opposed to the hour. So this is good for us. We're now billing 8 cases a day instead of 1. And we had 8,000 to go through. each one of them had 15 separate requirements. So yes, this is something that we've always been doing. Now, granted, where the new AI is coming in, the ChatGPT and the Grok and the Sora and all that, that doesn't really sit here because it's not a requirement that our customers are looking for. If they're not paying for it, if that's not something that they want, then that's not what we include. And so the AI work that we are doing is usually developing some kind of IP that we're going to hand off to the client to engage however they want. So, it's more about the development than it is, in some cases, the deployment. And in other cases, it's we develop the thing, have it run for them, and then give them whatever the answer is.
Unbelievable.
Thank you. Again, fellas, it's not what I expected to be doing. And the courses that I taught were environmental and chemistry and, like having nightmares about the nitrogen cycle and, how we got here.
You worry about the nitrogen cycle too? So do I.
Oh my God. I would tell my students, I would make them a deal every semester. If you promise to read it, I promise I won't put it on the exam. Okay? Because I don't want to lecture on the nitrogen cycle. It's 3 hours of torture for everybody involved here. So, as long as we all Boy Scouts it, then great. But, so yeah, I mean, again, what we've done in terms of internal utilization for AI, there isn't yet much that we've discovered for our internal mechanisms, either of onboarding people or going through the administrative tasking, that we would feel comfortable or confident enough in an automation processing. This isn't like a hospital where you are automating the patient intake capabilities. We did that for Operation Warp Speed. That makes sense when you are developing and managing, who's getting what vaccine when, what demographic, and what location. That makes sense. As a small firm, there's not a real reason for us to find that kind of automation beyond what we're already doing.
Got it. So I know we're coming up on time. I want to be considerate of your time. So tremendous story, Dr. Nick. And I, one of the questions we like to ask our guests is, regardless of how you're using or deploying AI in your business, it sounds like, you've been well ahead of this. And aside from joking about, having the house robot, if you will, how do you augment your personal life with AI, with the various tools that are out there?
I mean, I try and use Siri as often as possible, but for whatever reason, whenever I ask it to play like Iron Maiden, it doesn't work right. I don't know, so I've kind of given up. But I will say we don't have any passive listening devices in the house because of what I do, because of my clearances. It is a flat out security risk, so we don't have them, and I advocate for people to not have them. Granted, our phones are listening all the time anyway. But my personal utilization of AI is very limited to the most basics of tasks. Roomba, automatic cat feeder when we had one, things on timers on the lights. I'm still very much my father's son. I like the tangible, the touchable. I like to do it myself. What I have found is that, like, even my truck, the 2021 Jeep, the more advanced it gets, the more shit can break. And I'm not there yet. So I do not yet trust that there's a real need to implement so much. I very much like to be able to fix things myself. So, and this is coming from somebody who codes, or at least I used to anyway. And I would go in and fix things on my own. My latest endeavor is to try and disable that stupid auto start thing on the truck. You let go of the gas, hit the brake, and the engine shuts off. Like, why is that? I know why. But I think it's stupid. You're going to kill the starter. Why would you do this? Oh, you're trying to save emissions. No, the engine starts up and you're putting out more emissions anyway. In New Jersey, it doesn't work, especially with the traffic. But like I said, when AI gets to a point where I can reliably task some in-home thing to do the mundane tasks that I just don't feel like doing, great. The worry that I have is then that my children will grow up seeing Bicentennial Man walking around the house doing the task that they should learn to do themselves because my boys are not going to be able to afford a drone to do it themselves, right? So that's why they observe me doing laundry I throw the laundry in right when they go to bed. So, I think the pendulum will swing. I'm a late adopter for a lot of things in my personal life. Out in the professional world, different story, because I can spend the time necessary because the Navy makes me. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. But at home, I'm still a hammer and nails kind of guy.
That's cool. So are we. Awesome.
For my kids, I think it's important that they see how things work. Case in point, there is no reason why my dishwasher should have Wi-Fi connectivity.
Yeah, I'm like shopping for a new wall oven, and they're like, "Oh, this one's Wi-Fi capable." And so what?
Why?
Yeah.
And the salesman said, "Oh, you can start the dishwasher from the living room." Why would I want that? And then the question I had to ask him was, well, does it need to be connected to Wi-Fi in order to work? No. Okay. Thank God. Fantastic.
Unbelievable. Great stuff today, Dr. Nick. Tell our audience, where can people find you and learn more about what you and Nomadics are doing?
Folks can come find us at nomadics.com, November, Oscar, Mike, Alpha, Delta, India, Charlie, Sierra.com. So it's Nomadics, Nomad Intelligence Consulting and Strategy. Not Nomadics, those are the backpack people with the T. Not Nomadics with the X, those are the towel people. And not Nomadics in South Jersey, those are the HVAC people. And if you need to reach me, you can always find me on LinkedIn, info@nomadics.com. It'll get to me eventually. But yeah, come check us out all the time. I was just named I was on MSN's entrepreneurs list for 2025. Morris County gave us the Business of the Year Award in 2025. And I was on the Society of Military Engineers Spaces of 25 for Federal Business. Any of those places, you can find us there too. But yeah, stop by. The website reads like stereo instructions. We know. If you don't know what you're looking at, that's fine. It's not for you anyway. The Navy sees it. Okay, good. This is what we want. But please, as an educator, I always encourage people to reach out. I'm happy to talk to them about starting their own business or not, going back to school or not. I encourage people to really take the time to, if you need insight, I am happy to provide. As you can tell, I'd love to talk.
Amazing. Nick, you want to take us home?
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nick. If you enjoy this, so by the way, Matt, we just had last episode, we had someone shooting rockets up into space. Now we've got underwater defense drones, probably blowing things up. He's not allowed to tell us about it. He's shaking his head, so maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So if you love the show, go ahead, leave us a comment, leave us a review. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Share this out. And just like we ask every guest, Dr. Nick, if you have a guest that you could share with us that would be perfect for this show, please let us know so we can bring more educational, great content.
Sounds good, Nick. Thank you, Dr. Nick.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
Yep.